I'm Melody Thompson, 28 years old, and I've been playing piano since I was 4. My fingers know the keys better than my mother knows me. Growing up, my talent was overshadowed by my sister Caitlin's achievements, at least in my mother's eyes. When Caitlin's wedding invitation arrived with a special request for me to perform, I knew my mother was setting me up for humiliation. What she didn't expect was how my performance would silence every guest and wipe that smug smile off her face. Before I tell you how my piano piece changed everything that day, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by family. Trust me, this story might inspire you to show your true self too. Growing up in Boston, I showed musical aptitude almost as soon as I could reach a keyboard. My earliest memory is sitting on my grandmother's lap, picking out Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star by ear at age 3. My father, Michael, beamed with pride, while my mother, Rebecca, dismissed it as cute, but nothing special. That became the soundtrack of my childhood. By 6, my piano teacher, Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins, told my parents I had perfect pitch and remarkable potential. She could be performing at Symphony Hall someday, she'd said with conviction. Dad wanted to nurture my talent, but Mom had other ideas. Music is a hobby, not a career path, she'd declare, usually within my earshot. Meanwhile, my sister Caitlin, 3 years older, received very different treatment. When she joined the junior cheerleading squad, Mom reorganized her entire schedule to attend every practice. When Caitlin made the honor roll, we celebrated with dinner at fancy restaurants. When I won my first piano competition at age 8, Mom merely nodded and said, "That's nice, dear," before changing the subject to Caitlin's upcoming science fair. "Your sister needs support for things that matter," Mom would say. Piano competitions don't build character like team sports do. Dad would occasionally push back, saying things like, "Rebecca, you should have heard her play today." The judge said he's rarely heard such emotion from someone so young. But these comments were met with eye rolls or subject changes. I continued lessons with Mrs. Jenkins, who became my musical sanctuary. In her cozy studio with walls lined with composer portraits, I could be my authentic self. "Your mother doesn't understand what she has," Mrs. Jenkins would whisper while marking my sheet music. "But someday everyone will." I practiced religiously, finding solace in Chopin's nocturnes and Bach's intricate patterns. Music became my language. The one place where I could express everything I couldn't say at home. I'd pour my loneliness into minor keys and my rare moments of joy into major scales. When I was 12, I was selected to perform at a prestigious young musicians showcase. 2 weeks before the event, Mom announced we couldn't attend because Caitlin had a regional cheerleading competition the same weekend. "Your sister needs us there," she insisted. "There will be other recitals." That night, I cried until my pillow was soaked. Dad came to my room and sat on the edge of my bed. "I'm sorry, Melody," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll try to make it to your performance, even if Mom and Caitlin can't." But the day of the showcase, Dad texted that Mom insisted he drive Caitlin to her competition when her friend's carpool fell through. No one from my family heard me play Debussy's Clair de Lune to a standing ovation. By high school, the pattern was firmly established. Caitlin was the golden child. Cheerleading captain, prom queen, straight-A student headed for pre-med at Boston University. I was the quiet one who disappeared into practice rooms during lunch periods. My achievements, winning state competitions, being invited to master classes with renowned pianists, were acknowledged with passing comments like, "That's nice, but don't let it interfere with your grades." I stopped sharing my musical accomplishments altogether. When I was selected for a summer program at Tanglewood, I forged my mother's signature on the permission slip and told her it was a regular music camp. Dad slipped me extra money, knowing the truth but avoiding confrontation. "Just a few more years," he'd whisper when Mom wasn't around. "Then you can live your own life." The summer before college, I applied to music programs in secret. When acceptance letters arrived from Juilliard and Northwestern, I hid them from Mom, eventually telling her I'd chosen Northwestern for their psychology program, not mentioning the prestigious school of music that had offered me a scholarship. The day I left for Chicago was the first time I felt like I could breathe. For states away from Boston, from Mom's dismissive glances, from always being Caitlin's lesser shadow. Dad hugged me goodbye at the airport, whispering, "Play for yourself now, Melody. Play for yourself." Chicago became my rebirth. In the 8 years since leaving Boston, I'd built a life that felt authentic. My apartment, shared with my best friend Jasmine, featured a baby grand piano in the living room, the first major purchase I made after graduating. The walls weren't decorated with family photos, but with framed concert programs and vintage sheet music I'd collected from secondhand bookstores. I became a music therapist at Children's Memorial Hospital, helping kids process trauma, pain, and fear through music. The irony wasn't lost on me, using the very thing my mother had dismissed to help others heal. My colleagues respected my abilities, and my patients responded to my playing in ways that validated everything Mrs. Jenkins had seen in me years ago. My contact with family had dwindled to monthly phone calls with Dad and obligatory birthday and Christmas texts to Mom and Caitlin. Dad would occasionally visit, marveling at my life in Chicago. "You've really found your place," he'd say, looking around my apartment with pride. "I wish your mother could see this." But I kept my mother at arm's length. Each conversation left me feeling diminished, like I was shrinking back into that ignored child. She'd inevitably mention Caitlin's accomplishments, her residency at Massachusetts General, her boyfriend Brandon, who worked at a prestigious law firm, their new condo in Beacon Hill. "And how's your little music job?" she'd ask, the dismissive tone unchanged by time or distance. My friends became my chosen family. Jasmine, an elementary school art teacher, understood family disappointment, having parents who never accepted her choice to pursue education instead of law. Alex, a fellow therapist at the hospital, became both colleague and confidant. They knew about my talent. They'd heard me play when emotion overwhelmed me, when words failed, when a particularly difficult day at the hospital left me raw. "You should perform," Alex would say after hearing me play Rachmaninoff late into the night. "People need to hear what you can do." But I always refused. "I play for myself now," I'd say, echoing my father's parting words. The thought of performing publicly brought back the sting of competitions attended alone, of achievements unacknowledged. Then the invitation arrived. The cream-colored card doc with gold embossing announced Caitlin Thompson and Brandon Mitchell's wedding. I stared at it for a full 5 minutes before tossing it onto the kitchen counter, where it sat for a week, unanswered. Dad called on a Tuesday evening. "Did you get Caitlin's invitation?" he asked, his voice tentative. "Yes. Will you come?" "I haven't decided." A long pause followed. "She's your sister, Melody." "I'm aware of our biological connection," I replied, more sharply than intended. "Your mother, she misses you." I laughed, a short, harsh sound. "She misses having someone to compare to her perfect daughter." "That's not fair, isn't it?" "When was the last time she asked about my life? My work? When was the last time she expressed any interest in who I've become?" Dad sighed, the sound of a man caught between loyalty and truth. "People can change," he offered weakly. "She hasn't." "Come for me, then," he said finally. "I'd like to see both my daughters together." I agreed to think about it, which Dad took as a yes. The next day, Caitlin called for the first time in over a year. "So you're coming to the wedding?" she asked, bypassing any greeting. "I haven't decided," I repeated. "Dad said you were." Dad was being optimistic. Caitlin sighed dramatically. "It would mean a lot to me, Mel." The childhood nickname caught me off guard. No one had called me Mel in years. "Would it?" I asked. "Or would it just make the family photos more symmetric?" "That's not fair," she echoed our father. "We haven't been close, but you're still my sister. Brandon wants to meet you." "I've told him about you." "What exactly have you told him?" "That you're brilliant. That you always were. That you play piano like you were born doing it." Her answer surprised me into silence. Just come, she continued. If it's terrible, you never have to see any of us again. After hanging up, I called Jasmine, who was visiting her parents in Detroit. You should go, she said after I recounted the conversation. But set boundaries. Get a hotel room instead of staying with them. Have an exit strategy. That night, I sat at my piano, playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the piece that had always brought me comfort. As the final notes faded, I made my decision. I would go to Boston, attend my sister's wedding, and finally close this chapter of my life. I didn't know then that the wedding wouldn't be an ending, but an unexpected new beginning. The flight to Boston felt like traveling backward in time. As the plane descended over the harbor, familiar landmarks emerged: the Prudential Center, the Charles River, Fenway Park, each triggering memories I'd carefully packed away. By the time the taxi pulled up to my parents' Brookline home, my stomach was a tight knot of anxiety. The house looked exactly the same, colonial style with navy shutters, hydrangeas flanking the front steps, the brass knocker Dad polished every spring. I hesitated before ringing the doorbell, reminding myself I was a successful adult visiting for a specific event, not a child returning to seek approval. Mom opened the door, her appearance both familiar and strange, more silver threading her dark hair, new lines around her eyes, but the same perfect posture and critical gaze. "Melody," she said, her voice neutral. "You're here. Not welcome home, or it's good to see you. Just acknowledgement of my physical presence." "Hi, Mom," I replied, stepping inside. The house smelled the same, lemon furniture polish, and the faint scent of the gardenia perfume she'd worn for decades. Dad appeared from the kitchen, his face breaking into a genuine smile. "Melody." He embraced me tightly. "You look wonderful." "Thanks, Dad." I hugged him back, noticing how much smaller he seemed then in my memory. "Caitlin and Brandon will be here soon," Mom said, already turning toward the living room. "They're coming for dinner. Your room is ready upstairs." I followed her through the house, noting the updates: new sofa, different artwork, alongside constants like the grandfather clock in the hallway and the family photos dominating the walls. I noticed my graduation picture had been added, but none of my performances or recitals appeared anywhere. My childhood bedroom had been converted to a guest room, all traces of my youth removed except for a small framed photo of me at the piano, age 10, on the dresser. It looked like a room in a bed and breakfast. Pleasant but impersonal. I was unpacking when the front door opened, followed by excited voices. Taking a deep breath, I headed downstairs to meet Caitlin and her fiancé. My sister looked polished and confident, designer jeans, cashmere sweater, engagement ring catching the light as she gestured. Brandon was tall with kind eyes behind stylish glasses and an easy smile. He extended his hand immediately. "You must be Melody. I've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I replied automatically. "The best," he assured me, seeming genuine. "Caitlin says you're a musical genius." My sister laughed nervously. "I said she's very talented, not that she's Mozart." Mom interjected, "Let's not exaggerate. Melody plays nicely." "Dinner's ready, everyone." The dining room table was set with the good china, the setting for every important family occasion of my childhood. Conversation flowed awkwardly at first, with Dad asking about my life in Chicago, while Mom redirected discussion to wedding details whenever possible. "Brandon's family is flying in from California," she informed me. "His father is a federal judge." "Semi-retired," Brandon corrected gently. "He mostly gardens now and drives my mother crazy." I liked him more for the clarification. As dessert was served, Mom's signature apple crisp, Caitlin cleared her throat. "So, Mel, we have a favor to ask." Something in her tone made me tense. "We've had a last-minute change with our reception music," she continued. "The pianist we hired double-booked and canceled yesterday." "That's unfortunate," I said carefully. "We were hoping you might step in," Brandon said. Caitlin says you're incredible. Before I could respond, Mom added, it's just background music during the cocktail hour and dinner. Nothing complicated. Just simple pieces so you won't make mistakes. It's not like anyone will really be listening. The familiar dismissal stung as sharply as it had 20 years ago. You want me to play at your wedding? I asked Caitlin directly. It would really help us out, she replied. And it would be nice to have a personal touch. Mom smiled thinly. You can manage a few simple tunes, can't you? It's not like we're asking you to perform at Carnegie Hall. I haven't said yes yet, I pointed out. Oh, but you must, Mom continued, speaking to the table rather than to me. Everyone's confirmed you'll be playing. I've already told the event coordinator. You what? I stared at her. It's all arranged, she said smugly. Just some background music, like I said. That's all you'll need to provide. The presumption, the dismissal of my ability, the total disregard for my consent. It was so familiar it made my teeth ache. I began. Please, Mel, Caitlin interrupted. It would mean a lot to me. Brandon looked uncomfortable. If you'd rather not, we understand. We can find another solution. No, we can't, Mom said firmly. Not at this late date. Dad, who had been silent, finally spoke. Melody, think about it overnight. No pressure. But the pressure was already crushing. After dinner, Dad found me in the backyard, staring at the old maple tree where my swing had once hung. I'm sorry about your mother, he said quietly. She doesn't understand what she's asking. She understands exactly what she's asking, I replied. She's setting me up to be background noise at Caitlin's perfect day. Just like I've always been background noise in this family. That's not true, he protested weakly. Isn't it? She's never once acknowledged my abilities. Now she wants me to play a few simple tunes because no one will be listening anyway. Dad looked at his shoes. For family peace, Melody. Just this once. Family peace has always meant me giving in, I said bitterly. When does someone else compromise? After the wedding, he promised. We'll talk about everything after the wedding. It was the same promise he'd been making my entire life. After this recital. After this school year. After Caitlin graduates. Always after some event on the horizon that never seemed to arrive. I went to bed without committing, but knew I was trapped. Refusing would create a scene that would dominate the wedding weekend, confirming my role as the difficult daughter. Mom had orchestrated it perfectly, as always. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake in the sterile guest room that had once been mine, staring at the ceiling and contemplating my options. I could refuse to play, but Mom would make me the villain. I could play as requested, simple background pieces beneath the guests' conversations, but the thought made my fingers curl into fists. Or I could leave, return to Chicago and my real life, but that would hurt Dad and give Mom ammunition for years of "your sister couldn't even attend your wedding" comments. Around 3 a.m., I slipped downstairs to the living room where Mom's upright piano sat. I didn't turn on lights, didn't need to, my fingers knew their way by muscle memory. I touched the keys without pressing them, feeling the cool ivory beneath my fingertips. This piano had been my first, where I'd learned scales and chords, where I'd first played Mozart and Beethoven. You're up early. Dad's voice came from the doorway, making me jump. Couldn't sleep? I admitted. He joined me on the bench, the wood creaking slightly under our combined weight. You know, I kept up with your performances in college. Found the recordings online. I turned to him, surprised. You did? He nodded. Your Chopin was always my favorite. The way you played his Ballade No. 1, it brought tears to my eyes. Why didn't you ever say anything? Dad sighed, a sound heavy with regret. Your mother, she always thought I encouraged your music too much. Said I was setting you up for disappointment. So you let her dismiss me instead? I failed you, he said simply. I should have stood up for you more. For your talent. We sat in silence for a moment, the unplayed piano between us like a third presence. Will you play something now? He asked. Just for me. I hesitated, then placed my fingers on the keys and began playing Debussy's Clair de Lune, the piece no one from my family had heard at that showcase years ago. The piano was badly out of tune, but in the dark living room, with only Dad as audience, I played with the emotion I normally reserved for my apartment in Chicago. When I finished, Dad wiped his eyes. "That's what they'll hear at the wedding," he whispered. "That's what they should hear." After he returned to bed, I sat alone with the piano until dawn, making my decision. In the morning, I left the house before anyone else woke up. I walked through my old neighborhood as the sun rose, past the elementary school I'd attended, the park where I'd never quite fit in with the other kids, the local library where I'd hidden among books during summers when everyone else was at the pool or beach. Without conscious intention, I found myself outside Mrs. Jenkins's house, a modest Victorian with flower boxes beneath every window. I almost turned away, but then saw her in the front garden, her white hair catching the morning light as she pruned roses. "Melody Thompson," she called, straightening with a smile. I'd know that walk anywhere. She invited me in for tea, her home unchanged, still crowded with books and sheet music, 2 grand pianos dominating the living room, walls covered with photos of students past and present. I spotted myself at various ages, from gap-toothed child to serious teenager. "Caitlin's wedding brings you home," she asked, setting teacups on a small table. "How did you know about that?" She smiled. "Small town, big news. The Thompson-Mitchell wedding is quite the event, according to the Brookline Gazette." I told her everything, the request to play, my mother's dismissal, my indecision. "Your mother never understood your gift," Mrs. Jenkins said bluntly. "But that doesn't mean you should diminish yourself to meet her expectations. If I play as she wants, simple background pieces, I'll be miserable. And if you play as you can?" I sighed. "She'll be angry that I drew attention away from Caitlin." Mrs. Jenkins took my hands in hers, examining my fingers as she had when I was a child. "These hands weren't made for background music, Melody. They were made for Rachmaninoff and Liszt, for power and passion. What should I do? What does your heart tell you?" I thought for a moment. "That I'm tired of hiding my talent to make others comfortable." She nodded. "Then don't hide. Play something that matters to you. Something that speaks your truth." Before I left, she led me to one of her pianos. "Show me what you're considering." I sat and began to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the piece that had always felt like my own emotional biography, beginning in darkness before building to triumphant resolution. I played the solo piano reduction, my fingers flying over the keys in the complex passages I knew by heart. Mrs. Jenkins watched, her eyes bright. "That's what you should play, my dear. That's your voice." "It's too showy for a wedding," I protested. "It's exactly right for this wedding," she corrected. "For your wedding performance." I left with renewed determination. I would play at Caitlin's wedding, but I would play my music my way. Not as background noise, but as the artist I had become despite my mother's efforts to minimize me. Back at the house, I avoided confrontation by agreeing to play appropriate music for the reception, letting Mom believe I'd capitulated. The relief on Dad's face was worth the deception. That evening, I spent hours at Mrs. Jenkins's home studio, practicing the Rachmaninoff until every note felt like an extension of my own voice. When I returned to my parents' house late that night, I felt calmer than I had in years. Whatever happened at the wedding, I would finally be true to myself and my music. The morning of Caitlin's wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect October day that makes New England famous. The house became a flurry of activity, hairstylists, makeup artists, and the wedding planner's assistants creating an atmosphere of controlled chaos. I kept to myself, getting ready in the guest room, applying my own makeup and styling my hair into a simple updo. I'd chosen a deep blue dress that complemented my role as reluctant pianist rather than announcing me as the sister of the bride. Mom noticed immediately when I came downstairs. "That's what you're wearing?" she asked, eyebrows raised. I thought we agreed on the champagne dress we looked at yesterday. You agreed. I didn't, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Blue suits me better. She pursed her lips, but was distracted by a call from the florist. I escaped to the kitchen where Dad was making coffee, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo. You look beautiful, he said, handing me a mug. The blue brings out your eyes. Thanks, Dad. Caitlin emerged from the master bedroom where she'd been getting ready, a vision in traditional white, her dress elegant and understated in a way that perfectly suited her. For a moment, I saw past our history to the sister I'd once adored before our mother's favoritism created a chasm between us. You look amazing, Caitlin, I said sincerely. She smiled, a flash of genuine warmth. Thanks, Mel. Then, glancing at my dress, Mom's having a fit about the blue, isn't she? Of course. Good, Caitlin said, surprising me. Someone needs to rattle her perfect vision occasionally. Before I could respond, Mom swept in, fussing with Caitlin's veil. The cars are here. Melody, you'll go to the church with your father. I'm riding with Caitlin. The ceremony was being held at the historic Trinity Church in Copley Square, with the reception following at the Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel across the square. Dad and I rode in silence, both lost in our thoughts as Boston's familiar landmarks passed by. Your mother means well, he said finally as we approached the church. She just doesn't know how to show it properly. I didn't answer. Today wasn't the day to unpack decades of maternal indifference. The church was breathtaking, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, flowers adorning every pew. I took my seat beside distant relatives who greeted me with vague recognition. You're Rebecca's other daughter, right? The one who moved away. The ceremony proceeded perfectly, Caitlin radiant, Brandon beaming, their vows personal and touching. Despite myself, I felt tears when they exchanged rings. Whatever our differences, Caitlin deserved happiness. After the ceremony, guests migrated across the square to the hotel while the wedding party remained for photographs. As family, I was trapped in an hour of posed pictures, Mom micromanaging every arrangement. Melody, stand behind your sister. No, not there. You're blocking her train. Can't you follow simple directions? I bit my tongue, reminding myself this would all be over soon. When we finally arrived at the reception, I slipped away to check the piano, a magnificent Steinway grand positioned near the dance floor. I ran my fingers lightly over the keys, confirming it was perfectly tuned. The event coordinator approached, clipboard in hand. You're the bride's sister who's playing during cocktails and dinner? I nodded. We've got you scheduled from 6:30 to 8 o'clock, with breaks, of course. The MC will introduce you shortly. As I walked toward the restroom to collect myself before performing, I overheard Mom speaking to an elegant older woman I recognized as Brandon's mother. Yes, Melody will provide some simple background music during dinner. Nothing special, just a few basic pieces. The real band starts for dancing later. How lovely that she's participating, Mrs. Mitchell replied. Brandon mentioned she's quite accomplished. Mom laughed dismissively. Oh, she plays for children at a hospital. Just simple tunes. Tonight is the same, just something to fill the silence during dinner. I ducked into the restroom before she could see me, hands shaking with familiar hurt and renewed anger. As I splashed cold water on my face, the door opened and Jasmine walked in, resplendent in a red dress I'd never seen. Surprise, she announced, opening her arms. What are you doing here? I gasped, embracing her. Did you really think I'd let you face the Thompson family reunion alone? I drove in this morning. How did you even get in? She grinned. I told the door person I was your plus one. Your dad saw me and backed me up. He's pretty cool, your dad. Her presence steadied me. My mother just told Brandon's mom that I play simple tunes for children. Jasmine's eyes flashed. Then it's definitely time they heard what you can really do. I'm nervous, I admitted. I haven't performed publicly in years. This isn't a performance, Jasmine said firmly. This is your declaration of independence." We rejoined the reception where guests were enjoying cocktails before dinner. Dad found us immediately, greeting Jasmine warmly. "Glad you made it." Melody might need moral support. Aunt Gina, my father's sister, approached next. "Is this young lady going to hear you play? I remember when you were little, always at that piano. Had such a gift." "You remember?" I asked, surprised. "Of course. Your father used to send me videos of your recitals. I always thought you'd end up at Juilliard or somewhere fancy." I stared at Dad, who looked slightly embarrassed. "You recorded my recitals?" "Everyone I attended," he confirmed. "Sent them to my side of the family." This revelation, that at least part of my family had witnessed my musical journey, warmed something long cold inside me. The reception coordinator appeared, signaling it was time. Mom intercepted me before I could reach the piano. "Remember, just keep it simple," she instructed. "Nothing showy. This is Caitlin's day, not a recital." I nodded noncommittally and took my place at the piano as guests found their dinner tables. The MC introduced me as the bride's sister who will provide background music during dinner, not even using my name. As I adjusted the bench, I saw Jasmine give me a thumbs up from a back table where Dad had apparently seated her. Mom and Caitlin sat at the head table with Brandon and his parents, all engaged in animated conversation, not even glancing my way. I placed my fingers on the keys and took a deep breath. The Fairmont's grand ballroom glittered with candlelight, crystal, and the subtle shimmer of the champagne and ivory decor Mom had selected. 200 guests filled tables arranged around a central dance floor, the head table positioned to oversee the entire room. I'd been placed at the furthest table from the family, seated with distant cousins who barely remembered me, a physical manifestation of my place in the family hierarchy. From the piano bench, I observed the scene, the expensive floral arrangements, the custom menu cards, the wedding party in their perfectly coordinated attire. Mom had orchestrated every detail, as she always did. This was her triumph as much as Caitlin's celebration. As dinner service began, Mom approached the microphone, glass in hand. "While you enjoy your first course, my younger daughter Melody will provide a little background music." She gestured vaguely in my direction without making eye contact. "Nothing too distracting. Just something pleasant while we eat." A few guests turned toward the piano, offering polite smiles before returning to their conversations. Mom leaned over to say something to Mrs. Mitchell, who nodded with a practiced social smile. As I sat at the piano, my hands hovering over the keys, I felt a familiar paralysis, the same sensation I'd experienced at childhood recitals when I'd catch Mom's disapproving gaze from the audience. For a moment, I considered playing exactly what she wanted, some gentle Mozart, perhaps, or simplified Debussy that would fade behind the dinner conversations. Then I saw Jasmine at her table, giving me an encouraging nod. Beyond her, I spotted Mrs. Jenkins, who had apparently been invited as Brandon's childhood piano teacher, a coincidence that felt like fate. And there was Dad, watching me with a mixture of hope and apprehension. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. I started with the opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Those famous, resonant, bell-like chords that build slowly in intensity. I played them softly at first, allowing conversations to continue, but with each progression, I increased the volume slightly, my fingers finding their strength and confidence. By the time I reached the main theme, conversations had begun to falter as guests turned toward the piano. I kept my eyes on the keys, pouring everything into the music, all the years of dismissal, of being background noise in my own family, of hiding my light to avoid outshining Caitlin. The restaurant staff paused in their service, plates held aloft as they listened. I moved through the first movement with growing intensity, the complex passages flowing from my fingers as naturally as breathing. This was the piece I played in my Chicago apartment when the day had been too much, when words failed, when only music could express what I felt. As I reached the climactic section, I finally looked up. The entire room had fallen silent. 200 faces were turned toward me, forks suspended midair, conversations abandoned. At the head table, Brandon watched with genuine appreciation while Caitlin's expression mixed surprise with something harder to define. And Mom, her face had transformed from its earlier smug satisfaction to shock, then disbelief, then a tightening around the eyes that I recognized as the look she got when things slipped beyond her control. I returned my focus to the music, navigating the intricate runs and emotional crescendos that made this piece so beloved and challenging. My body swayed with the rhythm, my feet working the pedals, my entire being consumed by the conversation between my hands and the magnificent instrument. When I completed the movement, the room remained silent for 3 breathless seconds before erupting in applause. Genuine, enthusiastic applause, not the polite acknowledgement of background music, but the recognition of an artist. I nodded in modest acceptance, then without pause, transitioned into Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, the piece Dad had mentioned hearing me play in college. This was for him, for the father who had recorded recitals and sent them to relatives, who had seen my gift even when he couldn't fully defend it. The ballade told my story in its narrative structure, beginning contemplatively before building to passionate intensity, its technical challenges serving the emotional journey rather than mere showmanship. As I played the final, tumultuous passages, I caught Dad's eye. He was weeping openly, nodding as if to say, "Yes, this is who you are." When I finished the Chopin, the applause was immediate and thunderous. People I'd never met approached the piano, offering compliments and questions. "Where did you study? Do you perform professionally?" "That was extraordinary." Brandon was among the first to reach me. "That was incredible," he said, his admiration evident. "Caitlin said you were talented, but that was something else entirely." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely appreciating his enthusiasm. "Would you consider playing something else later? Maybe during dessert?" Before I could answer, Mom appeared, her social smile firmly in place though her eyes were cold. "I think that's enough, don't you? The servers need to continue with dinner, and we have the band for dancing later." Brandon looked confused. "But Rebecca, that was amazing. Everyone loved it." "It was certainly unexpected," she replied tightly. "Melody always did have trouble following directions. If you'll excuse us, I need a word with my daughter." She pulled me aside, grip firm on my elbow. "What was that?" she hissed. "I told you to play background music." "I played what I felt," I replied calmly. "You deliberately upstaged your sister at her own wedding." "I played the piano as I was asked to do." "You turned a simple dinner accompaniment into a concert." "It's inappropriate." "The guests seemed to enjoy it." "That's not the point," she snapped. "This day is about Caitlin, not your need for attention." Dad appeared beside us, his expression unusually determined. "That's enough, Rebecca." "Michael," she deliberately. "Played beautifully," he interrupted. "Our daughter played beautifully, and everyone in this room knows it except you." Mom stared at him and used to contradiction. "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," Dad continued, his voice steady. "Let her enjoy the recognition she deserves. For once, just let her have this moment." Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, but she was too conscious of appearances to continue the argument in public. She turned and walked away, posture rigid with anger. Dad squeezed my shoulder. "I'm proud of you," he said. "So proud." Guests continued to approach throughout dinner, offering compliments that felt like cool water after a lifetime of drought. Elderly relatives I barely remembered told me they'd always known I was talented. Brandon's family, all from musical backgrounds I discovered, engaged me in conversations about composers and technique. Even Caitlin found her way to the piano during a lull. "You've been holding out on me," she said, her expression complicated. "I knew you played well, but that was professional level." "Thank you," I said, unsure how to navigate this new territory with her. "Mom's having a meltdown in the bathroom," she added with a strange half-smile. "Says you deliberately stole my spotlight." I tensed. "That wasn't my intention." Caitlin shrugged. Maybe not. But you did. And you know what? It's okay. It's one day. You've been in my shadow our entire lives. The frank acknowledgement stunned me. You knew. Of course I knew. Mom's not exactly subtle. She straightened my necklace in a surprisingly sisterly gesture. Brandon wants you to play again during dessert. Would you? Something happy this time. I nodded, speechless at this unexpected alliance. When dessert was served, I returned to the piano and played Gershwin, upbeat, joyful pieces that had guests tapping their feet and smiling. Mom remained at the head table, her smile fixed, her eyes avoiding the piano entirely. The band began setting up for dancing, and I prepared to relinquish the piano, but the bandleader approached. That was masterful, he said. Would you consider joining us for a number? We've got charts for Rhapsody in Blue, if you're game. And so my performance expanded into a collaboration, the band's horn section complementing my piano on Gershwin's iconic piece. Guests crowded the dance floor to watch, and even the catering staff paused in their duties. When we finished, Brandon's father raised his glass. To music, he toasted. And to Melody Thompson, who reminds us all of its power. 200 glasses raised in my direction, acknowledgement, appreciation, respect. Everything I'd never received in that ballroom full of family and strangers. Mom remained seated, her smile gone, her gaze somewhere in the middle distance. For once, she had no control over the narrative, no way to diminish what had just occurred. My talent, exposed to daylight after years in shadow, had proven too substantial to dismiss. As the reception transitioned to dancing, I found myself surrounded by people who wanted to talk about music, about my training, about my work as a music therapist. For the first time at a family event, I wasn't Caitlin's lesser shadow, but a person of interest in my own right. Brandon's uncle, a patron of the Boston Symphony, handed me his card. If you're ever interested in performing for our donor events, please call me. We're always looking for exceptional talent. Mrs. Jenkins found me near the dessert table, her eyes bright with pride. You played magnificently, she said, squeezing my hands. Exactly as I always knew you could. Even relatives who had never shown interest in my music approached with newfound respect. We had no idea, Aunt Sarah admitted. Your mother always just said you played a little piano. I accepted the compliments graciously, but inside, a lifetime of emotions churned. The validation felt wonderful, but also highlighted how much I'd been missing, how thoroughly my gifts had been minimized within my family. I was taking a moment alone on the hotel's terrace when Caitlin joined me, champagne glass in hand. Quite a night, she said, leaning against the railing beside me. I didn't mean to overshadow your wedding, I offered. She shook her head. You didn't. You added something special to it. She took a sip of champagne. Mom, on the other hand, is having a complete meltdown in the bridal suite. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's not about you, not really. Caitlin stared out at the Boston skyline. It's about her. It always has been. What do you mean? Did you know Mom wanted to be a concert pianist? That she studied at New England Conservatory but dropped out her second year. I stared at her. No. She never mentioned that. Dad told me once. Apparently, she wasn't quite good enough. Had technical skill, but lacked the emotional depth her professors wanted. Caitlin turned to face me. Then you came along, playing complex pieces by ear at 4, with all the emotion she never had. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. So she couldn't stand it, Caitlin finished. Couldn't stand that her daughter had the gift she wanted so desperately. And you? Did you always know? Caitlin smiled sadly. That she favored me? Of course. It was impossible to miss. But it wasn't a gift, Mel. Being the vessel for someone else's dreams and expectations isn't freedom. We stood in silence, two sisters seeing each other clearly perhaps for the first time. I envied you, you know, she said finally. You escaped. Built your own life. I'm still here, still trying to be perfect enough to justify her favoritism. The honesty between us felt fragile but precious. Before I could respond, Mom appeared at the terrace doorway. "Caitlin, people are asking for you. It's time to cut the cake." My sister straightened, the vulnerable moment passing. "Coming, Mom." As Caitlin moved toward the door, Mom remained, her gaze finally meeting mine directly. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight. I nodded, bracing myself. She joined me at the railing, smoothing her already immaculate dress. "That was quite a performance." "Thank you." It wasn't a compliment. It was inappropriate for the occasion. I took a deep breath. The guests seemed to appreciate it. The guests don't understand family dynamics. And what dynamics would those be, Mom? The ones where one daughter gets constant praise while the other gets dismissal and criticism. Her eyes widened slightly at my directness. "I've always supported both my daughters." "No, you haven't. You've always been threatened by my music." "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" "Caitlin just told me about your time at the conservatory." Mom went very still, her knuckles whitening on her clutch purse. "That has nothing to do with anything." "It has everything to do with everything," I countered. "You couldn't stand that I had the talent you wanted, so you spent my entire childhood minimizing it." "You're being dramatic." "I'm being honest. Maybe for the first time." Mom's carefully constructed facade cracked slightly. "You have no idea what it's like," she said, her voice suddenly raw. "To see your child effortlessly accomplish what you worked so hard for and failed to achieve. So you punished me for it? Made me feel like my gift was worthless." "I was protecting you," she insisted. "The music world is brutal. I didn't want you to face the rejection I did. That wasn't your decision to make. I'm your mother." "Yes." "And mothers are supposed to nurture their children's gifts, not bury them because of their own insecurities." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. For a moment, I saw past the perfect exterior to the wounded woman beneath. The young pianist whose dreams had shattered, who then had to watch her daughter surpass her without effort. "I didn't handle it well," she admitted finally, the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from her. "When you played tonight, it was beautiful. And painful. For me too," I said quietly. We stood in silence, decades of unspoken feelings between us. This wasn't reconciliation. Too much damage had been done for that, but perhaps it was the beginning of understanding. "They're waiting for us inside," Mom said finally, composure returning. "Your father insisted you join the family photos." It wasn't much, but it was something, an acknowledgement, however small, of my place in the family. The remainder of the reception passed in a blur of cake cutting, toasts, and dancing. Dad insisted on a father-daughter dance with me after his dance with Caitlin. As we moved across the floor to Ella Fitzgerald, he whispered, "You were magnificent tonight." "I'm sorry I didn't do more to support you." "You did what you could," I told him, meaning it. When I returned to Chicago 2 days later, the city felt different, or perhaps I was the one who had changed. I unpacked my suitcase and sat at my piano, playing softly as the afternoon light filtered through my apartment windows. Jasmine found me there when she returned from work. "So, how does it feel to be the talk of Boston society?" she asked, dropping onto the sofa. "Brandon's mom called you the musical revelation of the season on her Facebook page." I laughed. Surreal, but good. Over the following weeks, life resumed its normal rhythms, but with subtle shifts. I accepted an invitation to perform at a charity event for the hospital. I started teaching advanced students on weekends. I found myself playing more freely, more publicly, no longer hiding my light. Dad called more frequently, our conversations deeper and more honest. He visited Chicago for a weekend, attending one of my small performances at a local jazz club. "Your mother saw the video I took," he mentioned casually. "She said your interpretation of Chopin has matured beautifully." It wasn't an apology or a reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement. From Rebecca Thompson, that was significant. 3 months after the wedding, Caitlin called. "I have a medical conference in Chicago next month," she said. Thought maybe we could have dinner? If you're free. Our relationship was tentative, rebuilding from adult foundations rather than childhood roles. We met for dinner when she visited, discovering common ground we'd never explored as children. Mom remained mom, critical, controlling, difficult, but with the facade cracked, our interactions held more truth. I set boundaries, limited my visits to Boston, and refused to diminish myself in her presence. Sometimes she respected this, sometimes she didn't. But I no longer needed her approval as I once had. 6 months after the wedding, I established a scholarship fund for young musicians from challenging family backgrounds. I named it after Mrs. Jenkins, who cried when I told her. Music saved me, I explained at the small ceremony announcing the fund. I wanted to save others. The most profound change, however, was internal. The wedding performance had forced me to confront both my talent and the family dynamics that had caused me to hide it. I'd spent years playing only for myself, containing my gift within safe boundaries. Now I allowed it to expand, to touch others, to exist in the world without apology. One evening, after a small recital at a community center, a young girl approached me. "I want to play like you someday," she said, eyes wide with admiration. "What's your name?" I asked. "Emma," she replied. "My mom says I should take up sports instead of piano, but I love it so much." I knelt to her level. "Then play, Emma. Play with all your heart. Your gift belongs to you, not to anyone else's expectations." She nodded solemnly, and I saw in her the child I had been, full of music and possibility. But unlike my younger self, Emma wouldn't have to hide her light. At least not if I could help it. As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey from that silenced child to the woman I'd become. The wedding that was meant to humiliate me had instead liberated me, forcing my talent into the light where it could finally be seen and acknowledged. Sometimes our greatest pain leads to our greatest growth. Sometimes the music we're most afraid to play is exactly what the world needs to hear. And sometimes, when we finally stop diminishing ourselves to make others comfortable, we discover that our authentic voice is more powerful than we ever imagined. So, if you're hiding your light, whatever it may be, your talent, your voice, your truth, I hope you find the courage to let it shine. The world needs your unique gift, even if some people can't handle its brightness. Would you share in the comments a time when you revealed your true self and surprised everyone? Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and thank you for listening to my journey from background music to center stage. Remember, your story deserves to be heard too, in all its complexity and beauty.